It's the ESC Tips.com Eurovision Preview Podcast. Join us as we sort this year's contenders from the duds.
Attention, you are now entering a fanboy-free zone.
Hello and welcome to our second Eurovision 2015 preview podcast. Since last week's podcast, Ewan's prediction of Portugal's Salvador sitting out rehearsals with his sister standing in has come true. This week, though, we have two more Eurovision experts to share their predictions on semi-final 2. I will, of course, ask them for their winner at the end of the show. So on to our guests. Back in the day, before YouTube and live commentary, the Eurovision fandom and betting world relied on the opinions of Akko Keith, otherwise known as Keith Mills. Welcome, Keith.
Hello there, guys. Hello, Gavin. How are you?
I'm grand, thank you. Are you travelling to Eurovision this year?
No, I'm not. I've decided to take the year off. I was in Kiev for 2005, and while it's a lovely city, I have no great desire to see it for the rest of my life.
Okay. As ever, Keith is straight to the point. So, over to our next guest. He's synonymous for the value punt, and if it was a surprise winner, you can guarantee he had a bet on it. Please welcome Rob Furber from entertainmentodds.com. Hello, Rob.
Hi, Gav. How you doing?
All good, all good. You're definitely coming to Kiev, I know about that.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So, flying out a week on Saturday.
Well, yeah, you're on the same flight as us and Ewan, so it's insider trading from BA.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we can get stuck in the BA lounge.
Yes.
That's a whole new dimension to the phrase the Mile High Club.
That's the fella. Right, so as I mentioned in the introduction, we will be talking about semi-final 2 today. What songs are in contention for the win, who's more than likely to miss out, and who could surprise. First up, Tiana could be In Too Deep for Serbia. Next, Austria's Nathan Trent is running on air. Jana Buczeska will be Dancing Alone for Macedonia. In fourth, Claudia sings Breathlessly for Malta. Alinka and Alex are yodeling it for Romania. Next, it's the Netherlands, Ogine with Light and Shadows. In seventh, we have Hungary's Josi Papai performing Origo. Denmark are 8th, and Anya will sing Where I Am. Last in this half, Ireland's Brendan Murray is Dying to Try, or Dying to Hit Those Big Notes. In 10th, Ralph Siegel returns with Spirit of the Night for Valentina Monetta and Jimmy Wilson. Croatia's Jacques Kudek will duet with himself. His song is My Friend. Next, Just will grab the moment for Norway. Apollo in 13th. I think Krista's been having a bit of fun. It's Time Bell for Switzerland. Naviband are next for Belarus with Story of My Life. In 15th, we have Christian Kostov with Beautiful Mess for Bulgaria. Lithuania are next with Fused Mark with Reign of Revolution. The penultimate slot goes to Estonia. Koit Toom and Laura perform Verona. And last up, Israel's Imri sings I Feel Alive. So let's start with Keith. Who are your main contenders for the semi-final win here?
I only see two potential winners in this semi-final. Bulgaria and Romania. Very, very different songs. But if you have a look at the map of this semi-final, there's a huge concentration of countries in the Balkan area and extending into Switzerland and Austria, which have large diasporas from the Balkan area. And I think that the only countries that will have broad enough appeal, I think Bulgaria would probably get very good support from the juries. I think there'll be a lot of public support for one of the few novelty entries this year from Romania, and only one of those two can win.
Yeah, I would tend to side with you there. Bulgaria's really played a strong hand this year, but Romania, it's difficult to vote against them, even though the song was amateurish in their national final. But they've really come together at the pre-contest parties. What about you, Rob? Are you in agreement?
I kind of am, yeah. I think Bulgaria is obviously going to be favourite, isn't it, for the semi-final 2 win. I think that's fair enough. But I do think it's quite difficult to call pre-rehearsals. It sounds like a bit of a cop-out. I think there's quite a few that, could get into contention on the back of, an excellent stage show and obviously, very competent vocal and so forth. So on my list, I would include the likes of Denmark, as a top 3 potential, let's say, and possibly Hungary. And then even, Estonia and Israel with their running orders, they could do something. And I think, there's room for nations to surprise, and maybe even someone like Norway to do pretty well in this semi-final.
Yeah, I think those top three slots are always up for grabs. I would definitely side with you on potentially Hungary. This has got... It seems to have quite a following. I was quite surprised at how well the fans took to it when I was in Amsterdam. I don't know about you, Rob, but everyone seemed to really like it. And it's unusual for a rap song or something as moody as that to get the crowd going. Are you on Hungary's side, Keith?
Yeah, well, as I said, after Bulgaria and Romania as potential winners, I then have another two countries that I think are virtually certain to qualify, and that's Hungary and Norway. But overall, I have the feeling that this is actually the weakest Eurovision semi-final since the first semi-final in 2013, when, if you remember, there was a whole series of Balkan countries again, and none of them voted for one another, and the juries shot them all down. And then countries like Ireland and Estonia and Belarus all qualified some of the weakest songs ever to come out of Eurovision semi-finals, and this is an equally weak semi-final. So I'm finding it easy to find countries that I think have really little chance of qualifying, but very great difficulty in finding absolute certainties to qualify.
Yeah, I think there's only a small handful. I mean, this is the semi-final where rehearsals or having the ticket to watch rehearsals it is the golden ticket. So there's a few that we think are in contention. What about the songs that could disappoint and miss out? Rob, who's on your value radar?
I think there's a good few borderliners, going into rehearsals, and I'm always looking at running order, and I'd be looking at FYR Macedonia as one that could be vulnerable, from the three slot. We've seen that performed in London and Amsterdam, and I think Jana was miming, wasn't she?
For sure.
On both those appearances.
Yep. She mimed in London.
Yeah. I mean that's a bit of a red flag for me. I mean the ESC fans they do seem to love that FYR Macedonia song, but for me it's a pretty run of the mill pop song. And I'm just thinking about the way that country has staged its entries in recent years, and that wouldn't fill me with much confidence either. But I think they've drafted in Sasha Jean Baptiste, haven't they, to help with the stage show in Kiev?
Yes, I've heard that as well. I heard that they've got a whole new team doing the stage show. I have two huge concerns about the Macedonian entry. First of all, I think one of the things that really lured me towards the song at the start was the great synth intro. And now they've remixed the song and they've taken that completely out. And they're now starting with a kind of a chorus singing the title. But if you start with the title of a song and you cut away the instrumental, you've got very little area to go in and progress the song. And I would share Rob's concerns on her vocals. I think this is very, very dodgy territory. I think this is a definite potential non-qualifier.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's one that all of us have taken on because it was a very short price to start with, and it has drifted a little bit to a slightly more realistic price, but I think it could drift even further with one poor first rehearsal in Kiev. I know that she was live in Israel. I think the reason she wasn't live at the other parties was because they couldn't simulate the telephone voice on the vocal. But Israel could. So she did perform live there. She was sort of okay, but I think the one thing I've noted is she's not really a dancer. She's not an upbeat song performer. And that is very apparent. She's got no charisma at all. And actually, in London, she was very unlikable.
Yeah, I just haven't taken to her at all. I've seen her being interviewed and she comes across as a very, very nice person, but there's no charisma on any of the performances that I've seen from her so far coming across from stage. And as much as I would like the song to qualify, I think it's now gone into the danger territory. But I'd throw another few serious no-hopers into the mix as well. And I think it's easier in the semi-final to go from the no-hopers and then see what you're left with rather than trying to pick the automatic qualifiers. I would give no hope to San Marino. I would give no hope to Lithuania. And I would give very, very limited hope to Malta, Ireland, Netherlands or Switzerland. I don't think any of those are making it from where they are right now.
Okay, there we go. We got Keith's brutal assessment there. I've only got 3 reds at the moment, my no-hopers, and those are Austria, San Marino and Lithuania. The reason I've gone with Austria is because the song, there's nothing much to it. And once you get to Imre... Oh, hello.
Sorry.
That's all right.
All incoming. Let's switch that.
Do you need to place a bet?
No.
So I've chosen Austria mainly because the song is quite anonymous by the time you get to Israel. And I think Israel will actually take some of its support. Austria are not known for their diaspora or any kind of regional ally support. You sure you don't want to get that, Rob?
Hopefully we won't get that ringing again. Sorry about that, Go.
It's all right. So that's Austria. Malta, I'm sort of okay. I think I've stated in another podcast that I quite like that 80s vibe. She sells it very well. Even though it is dated, she does it very well. Netherlands, I've never really liked the song. I think it's quite aimless. There's no melody to it, but their vocals are very good, and maybe the juries could be quite kind to them. There is a rumour going around that they will use the staging to portray the story of their ill mother, which I'm not too keen on that as a concept. I think it's very X Factor sob story.
You might want to take the sick bags off your flight then and save them for Ukraine.
Yeah, they were really good in Amsterdam. Obviously, it's a home crowd, but they were note perfect, which is what you'd expect. I think if they can convey some sort of life on stage rather than the kind of dowdy video that they recorded, they could be in with a shot. I don't get these predictions that people are saying they might get top 10. Sorry, if Dow couldn't get top 10, then these girls certainly aren't. Ireland, I think he really struggles with his vocals, and that has been apparent at every single party that he's performed at so far. Croatia, I think, could be in contention because it's mad, just like Cesar was in 2013. It'd be interesting to see how he stages that. Switzerland, a bit flat for me. Very long 3 minutes. They have tinkered with it. She's really desperate for Romanian support. That is one thing she's stated at every single pre-concert so far. I think if the commentators latch onto it in these in Romanian diaspora countries, that could help them out. She is vocally vulnerable, I think. She certainly was in the national final. She wasn't perfect, and I think the pressure could get to her. So jury rehearsal will be essential there. And then Belarus, that's also felt very long. And without their staging, there's not much to latch onto in the song. They're quite infectious, but you lose interest after probably a minute. What about you, Rob? Who are your borderliners, or who do you think is really more at risk than anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a very open semi-final, and it's a very low bar for qualification from this semi, like Keith was saying. I mean, the two I think are up against it are San Marino and Lithuania. But outside of those two, I think they've all got a chance. I've got a good few that are just borderline right now, and I just need to see more. When we get to rehearsals in Kiev, I'm a bit more positive on Ireland's qualification chances. I think compared to you guys. I think he is capable vocally, and I've heard that he's going to have this gospel choir, isn't he, lending support. And the song's got that big key change in the last minute, and I can see that, with the gospel choir sort of really elevating the song quite well. It's really about how they stage it, and if that sort of resonates or not. But
yeah, I think so. If they can do a Jedward on him and cover up some of his weaknesses, then it stands every chance of qualifying, and it does then sort of take away from the Netherlands' vocal performance. So actually, with some kind of gospel choir, that's an interesting question mark over Netherlands now, because they very much rely on this kind of vocal impact, and Ireland's potentially taking it away from them.
I would hold on now for a second on gospel choir. First of all, there's only 6 people on stage. He's one of them, so this choir can only consist of 5 people at best. And gospel choirs, And yeah, no, maths was always my strong point. And the other thing that I'd say is that gospel choirs work on range of vocals, from real deep bass vocals up to the sopranos. With 5 people, first of all, you have a limited range, and there's no real place for low octaves in a gospel choir in this song, because it's all set at a certain range. I think they will. I think it will be better than it's been at the preview parties, because I don't think it could be very much worse. But I still struggling to see anybody picking up a phone for this. Ireland is performs at number 9, and then Bulgaria does the very same kind of thing. Young boy doing a vocal performance of an interesting song, or a much better song in my opinion. At number 15, Bulgaria just walks all over Ireland.
I think so, but that's not to say that Bulgaria are planning to come first, whereas Ireland are planning to scrape in 9th or 10th. I think it's doable. There are so many songs that you could argue are sitting in that 8th to 12th position.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would question. I would agree with most of what you said, Gavin, but I take exception with on two of the things you said, and that I take a different opinion on, and that's Malta and Austria. I think Malta is a very dull, boring song. It's all right. It's benefited from the elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned so far, which is Russia being out. So it now becomes the first ballad after 3 up-tempo songs. But I think this is suffering from what I call Olivia Lewis syndrome, where a singer tries and tries and tries again to get to Eurovision, and eventually sympathy kicks in and she gets there with a very ordinary song. Olivia Lewis did it on her 13th effort, and Claudia Faniello is after getting there on her 10th song, and most of the songs that she didn't get there with are better than this. And I think that's, even with brown envelopes scattered all over Europe, I can't see Malta making it this year. And the other one I would take a different opinion on you, is Austria. I think Serbia and Macedonia, which surround them, are potentially weaker vocals. The Austrian boy has got charm, and he sells his song very, very well. I think there's enough with him and his performance to get him over the line.
That might be one we'll have to wait and see on. I've never been particularly keen on the song. I know he sells it very well, but it's very stage school rather than actually... I mean, people have compared him to Justin Timberlake, which I think is very flattering to him. I think if it was edgy like Justin Timberlake, I think he would stand more of a chance, but...
He's more of an Ollie Murs than a Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I do need to mention San Marino, though, because it was always on my red list. It still is on my red list, but... when I saw it in Amsterdam and at other Eurovision parties, they sell it very, very well. And Valentina, she finished, second time 11th, first time she crept into the final. This is a low bar semi-final. It wouldn't take much if San Marino are up to the brown envelopes like Malta.
It's different from anything else in the contest. And I think both of them as individuals are good performers. No question about that. I'm watching their performance in Amsterdam, and I thought they were very good. Now, but they suffer for me for the same problem that Estonia does. And that is that they are not people who work together normally. So they just don't have that interaction working with one another. Now, they can rehearse that possibly into the performance by the time it gets to May, but they're not there yet. Take that by contrast to Belarus, the Navi band, another duo who actually do work together all the time. And they just work off one another an awful lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree on Belarus. They are very natural. I would actually argue that San Marino are way better than Coit and Laura, who look totally unnatural together.
They're dreadful together. They look as if it goes back to Nevergreen. It's people who barely tolerate being on stage with the other person. Nothing about that Estonian entry appeals to me in the slightest. It's dated 1980s Europop claptrap. It's absolutely horrendously contrived vocals, but in a very weak semi-final, it's after getting a very, very good draw, and it could limp over the line. If you're looking for a good bet, Estonia to get over the line in the semi-final and qualify, and then finish last in the final.
Oh, that's bold. There will be certain Spain fans that will be very happy with that prediction, Keith. Anyway, are there any more shocks that could happen for you, Rob?
I think there's room for plenty of shocks. I mean, you guys have sort of covered it a fair bit. I do see the merits of Austria, like Keith. It has to be borderline because drawn in two. I think that's a distinct disadvantage. But he can sing it very well. He's got charisma. I think it's it's going to be staged okay. And like he said, you've got Serbia to start the semi-final, and then you've got FYR Macedonia following Nathan, and those two solo females, I think vocally, they're very, very suspect. Remains to be seen if they can do a good job or not, sort of covering them up, with backing vocalists and so forth in Kiev. But they're going to have to do an amazing job, because also Serbia, despite the fact, we always look at it historically as having a lot of voting strength, a lot of voting power. That is vulnerable for me. That could be another surprise NQ. I don't think that song suits Tajana at all. I think it's a studio song. Just not convinced by her performances that we've seen at the concerts. I thought Amsterdam wasn't very good at all. I just don't think it suits her. I don't think her vocal is right for that song. And I think it's going to be really hard to sell that well in terms of the staging. And I don't know if they're going to bring in backing vocalists or whatever, but it's also up tempo, which usually requires Tajana to probably dance around the stage a little bit. And we've seen before that when you have these up tempo solo female songs, they can really struggle vocally.
I think she's a bit of a party girl, actually. If you've seen that video of her, I think she was in a hotel in Hong Kong.
I agree. I like her as a performer, but that song, I totally agree with what Rob is saying. I think it's very vulnerable, and I'm getting worried that if you remember Hannah from Slovenia in 2013, which was a very similar song, and was a car crash vocal, I think Serbia could go down this road, unfortunately. And if she's weak, and if Macedonia at number 3 is weak, then Austria could be the only decent performance in the first 3 songs.
She has performed it live, obviously a slowed down version. I just wonder whether she uses these pre-concerts as just a bit of fun. She's not taking them seriously. I don't think she's actually sung every single word of the song at any of the pre-concerts yet. And I think that maybe she rocks up in Kiev first rehearsal and bang, she does it, once she's supported by all of the people that she needs to rely on stage.
Yeah, well, Serbia has everything going for it. It has neighbours, it has huge diaspora, Switzerland, Austria, all around the place. And the song itself is quite good. All it needs is a decent staging and performance to get it over the line. As you guys have said, it's a very low threshold. Serbia should be walking into the final from this semi-final. But if Macedonia and Serbia are weak, then Jack won't be for Croatia, and he's going to stand out. And people are writing this off, and I don't think they should.
No, not at all. He will be who Graham Norton calls the dark horse on Saturday night, probably. Right. Anything else to add for semi-final 2, guys, before we move on to your 2 predictions?
I will just mention 2 songs that we haven't really gone into this morning. And the first one is Israel. Got a great draw, but I'm far from convinced on the vocal on this one as well. He suffers from the Irish singer and Serbian singer. They're used to being backing vocalists, and I am less than convinced of Imre as a lead vocalist. I think it should qualify, but I would throw a major question mark after watching it being performed. And the other one that everybody seems to think is qualifying, and I'm far from certain on, is Denmark. I think Denmark is a very ordinary song, a very ordinary performance. It got chosen because she was known from the previous year's national final. The song itself is quite weak. I think this could absolutely fail abysmally and could do a 2002 and finish actually last, because I don't think her vocals are anything like as strong as people seem to think that they are.
Israel I'm sort of okay on, actually. I've seen him deliver a perfectly fine vocal performance, even on the slightly higher notes, which is at the very top of his range. I think his backing singers will support him on that. Denmark, I do agree it's a very basic song. I've compared it to El Haydardani, I'm Alive. It's a slightly better version of that, and she is actually as breathy as El Haydar was, and does tend to go off key during the early part. I don't know, have you noticed that, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. I mean, great looking girl. I think she's very telegenic. I think she's sort of very votable. But that vocal, I mean, during the Danish final, I just thought she got very, very shouty. And it's almost like she sort of gets a bit carried away in her performance. And then when she does that, she seems to lose a bit of control. I mean, if she can deliver it vocally, I think it's the sort of thing that the juries, might rate quite highly. But like you were saying, Gav, the song itself, I don't think it's anything special, is it?
No. A lot of the people that comment on the betting blogs, they all do the family test, and I think my family got through around 10 seconds of this, and they asked me to turn it off. And in fairness,
good taste.
I think we've pretty much covered all of the songs in this semi now. All that remains to be done is ask our guests who their two potential winners are from this year's lineup. So, Keith, it's time to dust off the Yakko prediction machine. Who are your two potential winners this year?
Okay, I'm going to shock everybody and say Italy. No, obviously it's the one to beat. When you've been watching Eurovision as long as I have, every contest these days is kind of echoes to a previous year. And for me, this year echoes 2009, a runaway favourite that was obviously a serious contender from the moment that he stepped on stage in the national final. Absolutely, I agree with some people who have reservations on the way that the song has been edited to 3 minutes, but I think he sells the song brilliantly. I think it has, Ewan put it brilliantly last week. There's nothing I can add to what he said. It has everything to sell it as a winner, and I think it will, in my opinion, be a record winner with the new points system. The one that I'm going to list as the other alternative, and this is going to come out really out of left field, and I echo back to 2009. When we were going to Moscow, the songs that were seen as challengers to Norway were from Greece and from Azerbaijan and from Turkey. Those were all up-tempo songs. They were all going to be going head-to-head with Rybak, but they were all very, very poor in comparison to him. And what actually came second in 2009 was a total contrast, which was the Icelandic song Is It True by Joanna. And I think, again, this year, the same thing is going to happen. It's going to be something that's going to be a complete contrast to Italy. That's going to be the song that's going to challenge more closely. Now, I think Bulgaria and Portugal, which has already been talked about, are serious contenders to take that spot. But I'll throw another song into the mix. From semi-final one, I think Finland is one. It's very, very long odds. It's not even one of the top 10 favourites to qualify from the first semi-final. But the staging of it has been perfect. It's moody, it's evocative, it's well performed. It's a very big contrast to anything else in the contest. And I think that could go very, very well. Maybe not challenge to win, but certainly a good each way bet.
There you go. That's the word from Keith. Rob, the obvious subject to rehearsals small print applies here. Who are your two picks?
I do think Italy is going to be very, very hard to beat. Having seen Francesco at the London concert and then again in Amsterdam, he just sells it so well. He's got huge charisma. He completely owns the stage. The one question mark is on the jury side. Might Italy just fall down a little bit on the jury side? I think it's going to get a really big televote, no doubt. If I was a juror, I'd be putting Italy right up there. I don't sort of see many negatives there, and I think it's about the performance. It's a song that's all about the performance, and he delivers a fantastic performance. So yeah, no doubt Italy is very hard to beat. If there is one that might upset Italy, I think I would go with Portugal. I think it's an exquisite song. I think it could do amazingly well on the jury side. And I see no reason why televoters won't be charmed by Salvador. We obviously have this narrative now with, his health issues as well, and he's not going to be able to attend when it comes to the semi-final rehearsals. And I think that actually works in Portugal's favour as well. Ideally, it needs a second half draw, I think, in the grand final. If it gets the second half draw, I think it could push Italy hard. And like I say, if Italy falls down on the jury side, I think Portugal is the one that potentially could take advantage.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about him not turning up for the rehearsals until the very last minute. You may know that I wrote the English lyrics for one of the songs that was in the Portuguese final this year, and I ended up sitting beside Salvador for in the green room for the very, very long interval in the Portuguese final. So we chatted a little bit. Yes, he is in pain for a lot of the time, and it will be difficult for him to perform. There's no question about it. And I think they're doing totally the right thing by not dragging him into the Eurovision circus until the very last minute. And I think that will, as Rob has said, will work very, very well for him. I think he's going to get a huge sympathy factor vote coming across from the audience, and that carries with a very strong, very emotive, very simple song. And Portugal, I think, should be expecting their best ever result this year.
In this new era of scoring, Portugal could be this year's Ukraine, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, and they have diaspora. I mean, the Salvador is a big story in Portugal, and that's the Portuguese diaspora keep very much in contact with home, and that story will go out to their diaspora. And I think that they can tap into France, Belgium, Switzerland. There's a huge Portuguese diaspora out there. So I think as much as I love Italy, my dream is Eurovision in Portugal. So I think the only regret that I will have for not being in Kiev would be if Portugal wins.
Okay, that's it, folks. Before we go, a big thank you to our two guests. Thank you, Keith.
No problem. Thank you, Gavin.
Pleasure. And thank you, Rob. I'll be seeing you in just under 2 weeks.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Gav. Thanks for inviting me on again.
Pleasure. Thank you all for listening. Please share this with your Facebook and Twitter friends. We are also available on iTunes. Now, we will be back next weekend with our final podcast of the year, previewing this year's automatic qualifiers. So until then, goodbye.
ESCtips.com will return with another show soon. In the meantime, show us some love by following us and sharing this podcast with your Facebook and Twitter friends.